And as we get into the fourth episode here, we're immediately introduced to the Ouroboros Meep, which is sad and depressed because no one has ever managed to beat Ouroboros or this particular god game. It's really cute to be able to see this character development between the different Meeps and the way they represent their respective gods. So I'm curious to see what some of the other gods' Meeps look like, but Ouroboros has one of the cutest ones, tiny little devil that's just depressed as all hell. And the game that's been selected by Ouroboros for all of the apostles to play is called the Forbidden Word, meaning they have to get the god Ouroboros to say a certain word that none of the apostles know. So the win objective is to get the god to say a certain word, and the hidden rule is to find out what the word might be. And one of the first hints that's been given for the Ouroboros game is that the word that Ouroboros needs to say has already been said one time by the different players. It's been said a few times since they've landed on Ouroboros. So under previous research, they know that Ouroboros has a clue on its head, and as soon as they moved their way up to the dragon's neck or the head, they found themselves in a trap of lightning. While everybody starts to panic and start to wonder what this word might be, the Meep lets them know that they've already said it at least once or twice. And respectively, everybody gets upset, wondering how they could have forgotten such a massive hint. But with everybody remaining in a state of flustered chaos, rapidly trying to guess the words that it may have said, Faye, in his natural tactical superiority, sits down calmly and tries to think about what word everyone might have said and what word Ouroboros, being a dragon, might be able to communicate themselves. So he sits down calmly and they figure out that the word is ow. So as soon as everybody landed on the dragon, they had bounced off at the scales, they had landed hard on its back, and they had all said ow, and those were the clues that gave him enough points to be able to find what the solution was for the first trap, and now they can proceed forward into the game and see what other puzzles Ouroboros may have in store for them. And Lady Laodicea, knowing that the gods have a whimsical sense of humor and will also play the tricks on humans to show, hey, if we're going to put you in such a basic trap at the beginning of this, then things should be very obvious to you. We're not making it hard and we're not trying to defeat you right away, but this hint should be self-relevant. Between those 2 points that have been made between the main characters, they're able to solve the first puzzle fairly quickly. Oh no, Lady Lashea. How are you going to possibly unleash all of your power in such a close vicinity to everybody? By trying to get Ouroboros to say ow, she gets overly excited, has an ADHD moment where she thinks about none of her surroundings and then unleashes the most powerful shockwave in the closest vicinity to her allies, causing half of her allies to get blown off of Ouroboros' back and eaten by the Leviathan, the floating whales that are protecting Ouroboros or thought to be its partner, while they're all surfing around in the clouds in the sky. So, Laodicea, how could you? You know better than this. I guess you don't. You're an excited child and it's adorable. Tisk tisk. She literally said time to unleash the beasts. Oh man, fun fact. That's what my girlfriend calls her boobs, the beasts. Time to unleash them. Ah! What's really curious is the way the captain of the team of the apostles reacts to Lady Laodicea when she apologizes for knocking everybody off. He's sincerely grateful for the fact that she made an apology. The dragon god had said, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking, but he doesn't react in anger or in any discernment whatsoever. He just accepts the apology and then moves on with the fact that even her power isn't going to be great enough to make the dragon say ow from brute force. So Faye is immediately intervening, saying this is a game about ingenuity. We're not going to just brute force our way through this. But it is curious to see the way they treat the dragon god as opposed to some of the other members throughout the series.
Game about ingenuity.
Following these events, the Meep says, whoopsie, I forgot to tell you about the hidden rule. And then everybody reacts in anger towards the Meep on how it's been incompetent, while Faye is the only one to really show a level of genuine kindness, as almost if it were a child that needed to be consolidated. Like, hey little buddy, it's okay, you're telling us now and we appreciate you. And that's really the way that you should be working with children who do have memory issues or have the lack of an ability to describe the full event in detail. And that's okay. Sometimes you got to be compassionate, patient, and I really like that attribute about this main character. And that's really a good life lesson on how to be able to treat other people. If someone's trying to help you, then show them kindness, show them patience, and show them respect. Berating and belittling them isn't going to get you anywhere, anything faster. So you might as well be the better person in the situation and show compassion. The world needs a little more compassion. Now we have the two first hidden rules of the game. The first hidden rule for Ouroboros is that if you do something, it will trigger something to happen. And the second rule is that if you trigger that thing to happen, you will momentarily be able to do something else. So they have a chain of rules where once they figure out what the first one is, they may be able to momentarily figure out what the second rule in place is for Ouroboros God game. And Lady Leolacheia's god-born jealousy is showing itself in full rage when Pearl Diamond gets terrified that the Leviathan are going to eat her. Faye reassures her they'll be safe as long as they're on Ouroboros' back. But in the process of getting scared and hugging on to Faye, her bosoms may have pressed up against him, which triggered the god's jealousy rage to come out. And it's quite literally hysterical. And we learned Pearl Diamond's new nickname. It's the Look Before You Leap girl. Miranda is the one who gave the nickname because she seems to think about something after she's already come up with the idea for the solution. So the solution is come before the thought process, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But it's really cute to see her exert the first moment of confidence in the series, where she finally takes charge in solving one of the puzzles and thinks she's found the solution. Faye is a little doubtful, but they do need to test things to find out if they work, so let her at it. And with Pearl Diamond taking charge, thinking she had solved the next puzzle where they had found an off-colored spike on Ouroboros' tail, she walks up and decides to hit it, and hits it with everything she got, and absolutely hysterical to see the power behind that compared to Lady Leolacheia's. It's a... oh man, can't even do the right sound effect, but just a tiny little pop of a hit that made me laugh pretty well. But either way, the trap activates and multiple people on the Apostles team are disintegrated and sent back to the human world. And then immediately the captain reacts in harsh, violent anger towards Pearl, a complete opposite reaction that he had towards the dragon god, Lady Leolacheia. So it's really interesting to see the actual anger and resentment they still hold for Pearl Diamond, being that she was the teammate that caused that captain to take another loss in the previous game. So they're still holding that anger and resentment, and it's very clear when they react to the way she had activated a trap, even though it was agreed upon by her team. And that sad, pitiful trauma response that Pearl lets out of a please don't be angry, I just want to help everybody, I just want to do my best and be one of the team players. So everybody from the captain's team is still mad at her, but Faye and Lady Leolacheia, her new teammates, have her back 110%, where when everybody starts getting mad and wanting to give up because of Pearl Diamond's activation of the trap, that's where Faye and Lady Leolacheia really step in, put a hand on her back and say, hey, we have your back. We don't blame you for anything that happens in this because we're doing it all together and we're figuring this out. And everybody else here who's getting upset is completely missing the point of the game. So the dragon god, Lady Leolacheia, finally puts her foot down and says, you are all stubborn and ignorant. She really gets upset with them for the way that they're treating Pearl, and rightfully so, when Pearl is another apostle who has made a mistake, but they're holding that against her and blaming her for the defeats that they faced in the past and what they're currently looking at. The god finally gets upset, puts her foot down and says, you will not treat Pearl this way. We are all in this together. This is a team activity. And on top of that, we should be having fun. It's a game. So the fact that they're sucking the piss poor attitude all out of everybody's fun makes her really upset. While Faye sits down and does his thing where he gets very tactical and he starts thinking about what the solutions to this might be, we now know that when you punch the scale with a different color, something happens. So he's trying to figure out what they may be able to do based off of that information. But they've discovered one of the hidden rules here, and it has taken Pearl messing up again, activating a trap and causing more of her comrades to lose, then And under the tension of all the Gods Game players being upset that Pearl has caused them their second loss and this going to be their third, they are really not having fun whatsoever. So Lady Leolashea has to remind them that Faye is the one person here who's taking the game seriously. He's really trying to find the answers himself and putting a lot of effort towards this, while they're just wanting to attack and blame Pearl for their loss. Because they want to take an unconditional surrender, different things like that, but it would cause a lot of the apostles to have their third loss, and they blame Pearl for giving them their second, when in reality the god probably would have won that game anyway. And the pursuing arguments between Faye and the captain of the team says, Faye makes the argument that this can be the first hidden rule. When we attack Ouroboros' tail, he retaliates. So when you do something, something will happen, and when that something happens, we're able to do another thing. And the captain says, no, that was obviously a trap. She punched it and it knocked out 4 or 5 of our players. Well, the argument behind Faye is saying that a god of this power wouldn't be settled with just knocking out 2 or 3 players with a trap. So the trap must have some type of hidden agenda behind it, because otherwise Ouroboros is powerful enough to lay a trap that would knock out everybody, or it's trying to hint or tease or tell them something. So that's the mindset going behind this. And I think that I can agree with it just from a biased perspective. But I do understand everybody's frustration from the captain's side, saying, hey, if we activate every trap that we're going to walk by, we're going to be eliminated without having a real shot at this. It's a really high risk move when you're on your last loss for being an apostle and at risk of losing all of your status as a celebrity. So I understand that tension on the back end of the team, but the way that Faye is able to handle it and keep calm, collected, and cool really shows a lot to the character that he is within the series. And in the midst of all of this happening, Faye coming up with solutions. Faye's plan to defeat Ouroboros is to double down on Pearl Diamond's play, where they attack the off-colored scale on the dragon's back to inflict wound and spark the trap. The trap activates again 10 times the force, because, you know, God of Dragons versus Pearl Diamond's punch is a little bit misconstrued in power. But as soon as Ouroboros activates the trap, it clears out all of the surrounding clouds from the Leviathan floating around Ouroboros, showing that the Leviathan weren't actually on Ouroboros' team, but they were neutral monsters. And as soon as Ouroboros attacks them, they start attacking Ouroboros back, because the lasers that shot out from the trap on his back had shot a symphony into the sky, destroying a lot of the apostles along with a lot of the Leviathans. So the Leviathans got angry, started attacking Ouroboros, and because of that, they were really close to the dragon's back. So Faye takes that opportunity to ride the Leviathans. Can you imagine being on a skywell and riding around a giant dragon? From there, they figured out what the second clue or the second secret rule to the game was. So when you do something, something will happen. First rule is when you attack the dragon will retaliate. When the dragon retaliates, it gives you the opportunity to ride the Leviathan momentarily. And it is momentarily, because just like in Mario, when you're riding on one of the blocks that has a time limit and it starts blinking before it drops you, that's like the Leviathan timer. So you can only be on one Leviathan for a small amount of time before they'll drop you out of the sky, assumingly. But they've managed to figure out what the first rule and the second rule are. So now it's just a matter of getting Ouroboros to say, ouch. And I think they might have a plan for this. And because Faye and Lady Leolashea are the first people to ever make it to the final stage of Ouroboros' game, the Meep actually looks insanely happy, which is adorable to see this depressed demon Meep finally turn a smile for the first time. Alright, and the solution Faye has found to make Ouroboros say ow is to destroy the eyes that Ouroboros was hiding underneath its head. So they thought that Ouroboros, being a 30,000-foot dragon, didn't have eyes. It was just hiding them on the bottom side. But they make a point where when they go to attack one of the eyes, the other eye is covering its blind spot, and it shows the eyes almost parallel, closer to how birds have a field of vision. So I'm really curious if anyone can explain to me, how in the hell does he expect me to believe that one eye is covering the other eye's blind spots when they're facing in completely opposite directions, on top of they're facing completely opposite directions, on top of the fact that they are on opposite sides of what essentially is a snout or a beak. Like, how does one eye over here and one eye over here, if I had eyes on the side of my head, cover each other's blind spots whatsoever? That doesn't even make sense to me. Am I missing something here? Never mind, I am missing something. I'm big dumb. Blind spot means the side that you can't see. So if you have an eye over here, this is your blind side. So of course your eyes are going to be covering each other's blind spots. And then if you have field of vision down and up and you try to go from above and down, then one eye is going to make sure that it's covering the above, one eye is below. You have one eye covering the left, one eye covering the right. I still don't like it. But now I feel stupid and it makes sense. So anyway, after discovering that the eyes are turrets and they have a protective glass covering them, Faye devises a brilliant plan to be able to bring down Ouroboros, and it's completely dependent on Pearl Diamond. So as they go to attack the eyeballs, Lady Leolachea has a powerful attack against one of the eyes because Faye has distracted them by flying around on the Leviathan. And then when Ouroboros gets punched, it proceeds to blast Faye in the face. Not Faye, so sorry. Lady Leolachea in the face. Just a good old purple blast right to the dome. Am I colorblind? Was that blast purple? Blast was 100% red. I definitely am colorblind. But in grand anime fashion, we have Faye devising the best plan to beat Ouroboros, and he goes in to create his own attack. But being that he doesn't have any strong super strength, his Arise doesn't give him any special power outside of immortality, he doesn't have to worry about dying so much, so he jumps directly in front of the turret blast for Ouroboros, and then calls the shot out to Pearl Diamond to say, hey, use the Wandering now, use the teleporter, bring me back to safety, and the plan is to send Ouroboros' turret laser back into its own eye and shoot itself in the face. So the timing has to be perfect on this, and he goes and proceeds to jump directly in front of Ouroboros' face, and right before he gets blasted, Pearl finally redeems herself and makes up for the loss that she had caused her last teammates by defeating the unbeatable god in their own game. So kudos to Pearl for having that minor redemption coming in when it absolutely counts, and then having this beautiful ending to the 4th episode where everybody is rejoiced in the fact that Pearl has redeemed herself, made up for the loss. They've finally beaten the unbeatable god, and everybody is off to their 5th win for Faye, 3rd win for Lady Leolachea. We have a redemption arc underway and a lot more cohesive bonding between these champions. We can really see Lady Leolachea defending the Gods games in what is supposed to be fun and entertaining, putting everyone in their place, and commending Faye throughout this entire process on his ability to sit down and take the game seriously. So we see that character cohesion getting stronger and stronger with each episode. We see the new characters that are being added onto the team at a very reasonable rate, might I add. I love when they bring new people into the anime slowly. They don't just introduce you to everyone all at one time where you're stuck trying to remember which characters have what powers. So it's really nice to be able to see a slow, intimate team starting off, as opposed to having to keep track of all of the captains from all the teams with all of these other characters. We really have our core group forming, and seeing those relationships form, seeing how it's coming to play is pretty damn exciting. And after defeating Ouroboros, Ouroboros takes human form, and they are the tiniest, cutest little human. They walk up and say, well done, tiny humans. Like, who are you to talk? Who do you think you are? Not only did I just beat you in your own game, but you're going to call me a tiny human? You're a pipsqueak. But as a gift, Faye was offered one of Ouroboros' eyes. That way they can return and challenge the god to a game anytime that they would like. Being the first people that have ever beaten Ouroboros, this has been a gift bestowed from the god. That way she can show respect, they can show respect, it can show respect, it can show respect, and continue playing with some of the best players in the world. So that's a lovely memento that's been given, and this is a great ending to the episode. It really shows the testament to how Faye can manage to keep his composure and hyper-evaluate situations even in the midst of high tension and a lot of teammates arguing. So the bond that they are sharing when they play these games really is dependent on one another. It's saying that, hey, we're all in this together and we are not going to have any blame or doubt towards an individual, that this is a collective unit and this is how we are going to conquer the gods games. Another god has been beaten, Ouroboros is down, and we're going to be getting into episode 5 here. And here we are at the very beginning of the 5th episode. We're immediately introduced to Nell, who seems to be an apostle that hasn't gotten over the grief or managed to cope with her last loss. And she wakes up from a nightmare of her loss, seeing Faye and Lady Leolachea beat Ouroboros. And from that moment, she decides to devote herself to Faye from there on. She hasn't met Faye yet, but it seems that she's her own apostle and wants to join his team maybe. I'm really excited to see where this goes. We've seen Nell in the anime openers throughout the season, and a couple different quips when they were showing the different arises that people are attributed from winning gods games. So we know that she has an arise based off some of the openers or some of the explanations they've given in the previous episodes, and we're finally introduced to this character. And her full name is Nell Reckless. I like that a lot. Hello, Miss Reckless. Let's get into this. And it seems the publicity that they've made from beating Ouroboros has transpired farther than Nell's inspiration. Lady Leolachea gets upset right at the beginning of the episode from not being able to dive into another gods game for over a month due to the fact their victory over Ouroboros has inspired all of the apostles in the city to see what was impossible before is now capable of being done. So they have diver quests that have booked out all of the gods games for a full month. This seems to be quite upsetting for Lady Leolachea as she's trying to get back to elements as quickly as possible. So they have to come up with a new solution to be able to get into a gods game. And this is where they find out there are different regional games all over the planet. So they're able to travel and go meet some of the different apostles, some of the different games, and find ways to keep themselves entertained. Faye has a worry that if Lady Leolachea doesn't get into another gods game, her boredom might be the destruction of the city. So using that famous star status pull, he's able to come up with some different options. And now that we have the core of our team formed between Pearl Diamond, Faye, and Leolachea, they've been requested by the World's God Games to go to the sacred spring city of Malara. And upon Faye's immediate arrival to Melra, we see Nell introduce herself, holding up a sign, waiting for them to come. So the fact that the city was chosen by Pearl Diamond throwing a dart at a board to figure out where they were going to be going for their next game request is a stroke of luck. But it happened to be Nell's city, so Nell Reckless was sitting there waiting for them with a big sign ready to propose. And the way that she offers to become a teammate is one of the most cringe, unhinged voice lines. The entire thing is just phrasing over and over, and even Faye mentions it himself, like, whoa, you gotta really watch how you say these things because you are coming on extremely strong. The awkwardness and that overwhelming excitement that she has, followed by the embarrassment, is something that I can heavily relate to. And when I say Nell comes on completely too strong, awkward in all of the wrong ways, you have to see this. And immediately upon reacting way too strongly to introducing herself to Faye, Nell is almost hit by a car trying to chase him down, but we do get a first glimpse into what her arise ability is, and it's moment reversal. She can kick something and cause it to change directions or reverse. My apologies. The arise is called moment reversal, the ability to kick back any form of energy or mass. So as she almost gets hit by a car, she just, boom, has a moment reversal, kicks it back in the direction it was coming. The car takes no damage, she takes no damage. Mel is awesome. I want some fancy feet like that. Nell, not Mel. Nell, not Mel. Nell Reckless, not Mel Reckless. Nell. Mel, Nell, Nell, Nell. Nail it. Nail it. After escaping Nell, Faye, Lady Leolachea, and Pearl all head over to the Chief Secretary's office, where we're introduced to Belager Irons, who is the Chief Secretary from the Sacred City, and he introduces himself a little bit aggressively to Pearl Diamond. She thinks that he's a creeper, a pervert, and it's quite hilarious to see this military stern man stand there and say, "I'm not a pervert. I'm Chief Secretary. Let me restart, please." Belager Irons. And while talking to Chief Belager about what the Gods Games will be in 1 week upon arriving to Melra, he lets them know that there will actually be 2 bouts that will be taking place. The first one is going to be a day after their arrival, and it's considered to be an inner city battle or a friendly battle, and it's going to be against other apostles. So we're going to have 2 games in 1 week upon arriving to Melra, and then hopefully we get to see Nell reappear some way in this series. We kind of have to, you know, anime intros go hand in hand with spoilers, so... I just realized that her name is Nell from Mel. It's Melra, the city that they're in. Nell was a part of Mel. So, is her name literally just named after Mel, Ra, Nell, Reckless? Nell, Ra, you know, Ra, Reckless. See, picking up what I'm putting down here? Picking up what I'm putting down? And while we're talking to the Chief Belager, we have Dax, who is brought in as what seems to be a protagonist in the sense that they have... Wait, antagonist? Protagonist? Antagonist? I'm dyslexic, give me a second. Alright, here we go. We're introduced to Dax Gears Scimitar, who seems to be one of the antagonists brought into the series. And the only reason I feel this way is that slight ominous music they put behind his introduction. The attitude that he has when coming in is very stern and strong, and he seems to have a high level of arrogance towards his attitude, where it's a superiority type mindset, but he does recognize Faye as being one of the greatest apostles and tries to offer them to join his team. Upon rejecting Faye to transfer over to the team, Dax declares them rivals. So we're seeing this new antagonist come into the scene. We have Dax Gears Scimitar from the sacred spring city of Melra, and this is going to be one of the first competitors that Faye is going to face inside of the friendly inner city bout. That isn't going to be a God's game, but more of that friendly battle to show the different apostles from different cities. So we have Faye and Lady Leolashea that are coming from the City of Ruin along with Pearl Diamond. And now we're playing games inside of Melra, one of the neighboring cities, one of the world game cities, and seeing the different hierarchy towards the characters and the apostles, what rankings they have and how those are marked, based off having gold stripes on your uniform, etc., different things like that. Shortly after speaking with Dax, we see that Faye has done some digging in his natural character attitude, his ability to look deeper into things. He reviews more about Nell as he's looking at some of the Gods games that have happened inside of Melra. So Nell was a former apostle, 3 wins, 3 losses, but her last loss was due to forfeit of her captain's decision, even though she was convinced they can still win the game. And Faye recognizes the fact that she's come through on every order she was given and performed ecstatically in all of the games that she had played. So he's done a lot of deep research into looking at what type of person Nell really is and what her interest would be. They're giving a lot of the backstory behind how Nell was having that nightmare we saw at the very beginning of the episode, where she was forced into retiring. And that's the complete opposite of what Pearl Diamond had faced, where Pearl was voluntarily retiring because she felt guilty for causing some of her teammates to have their 3rd loss and be forced to retire. And in the exact opposite situation, we have Nell, who was forced to retire even though she wanted to keep playing. She never had the chance. That team took it away from her. So we get to see some of this kind of character development happening between the insight that they have with Nell, but we also know that Nell is one of the most awkward and cringy characters we've seen come onto the scene. So playing around that dynamic is going to be really interesting. We immediately in the next scene get to see that awkwardness that I was just talking about, where Nell pretends to be the room service for Faye and Lady Leolashea's room. She approaches with one of the most half-did, unhinged costumes, and then awkwardly runs away before being able to make any point across due to the fact they recognized her immediately. So we get to see the transition between the curiosity of characters, where Nell was really wanting to push to get into Faye's life. Faye gets curious, recognizes Nell, tries to ask her a couple questions, but she is so awkward, she uses her rise to run away at inhuman speed.
I'm just an inconspicuous hotel worker.
Like, no, you're Nell. And upon running away, we get a double confirmation as Nell runs into Dax, and it shows that they were both rookies who had started at the same time and were both highly praised as being top contenders in the Gods Games. Dax understands that even though Nell has fallen from her level of grace, the biggest difference between them was the teams that they were on. Dax reassures her that the only reason that she had failed is because of the teams that she had played with, as opposed to being on a superior team or one that had more cohesion. So we get this double confirmation that Nell really is one of the most talented apostles from this region. And it's the same thing that Faye was saying, where it's like she is able to execute every order she's given perfectly. So now we have the protagonist and the antagonist on the same side when it comes to this one character, and seeing the potential inside of her is going to be really cool when it comes out. With that being said though, her abilities are recognizable to the point that Dax offers Nell to become their team analyst. Even though she wouldn't be allowed to play in the games due to the fact she has 3 losses, she would still be able to come up with strategies and create data points that will help teams succeed. So she's recognized by the top apostles from her area, along with being recognized from the top apostles from Ruin. We see a lot of potential that's being built up or foreshadowing from Nell. And prior to the first regional bout that's happening, the local friendly match between Dax and Faye, Nell runs into Faye and says, "You have to win this match for me." She doesn't give the direct reasoning, but we had seen in the scene before that she had placed a wager with Dax that Faye was going to be the winner. And when she rejected Dax's offer to become the team analyst, she said, "Hey, I have no interest in being on anyone's team but Faye, but I will wager that he wins the bout." So I assume that if he loses this bout, Nell is going to have to join Dax's team as their analyst. And if he wins the bout, Faye being he, then Nell does not have to do that. And she may have an opportunity to join Faye's team yet. Even though she has the 3 losses, they are still looking for an analyst. There are these such small moments inside of Faye's character that you get insight towards, where when Nell says, "Hey, you have to win this, but it doesn't matter why, just do your best," she takes off running and says, "I'll be cheering for you from the stands." And you have this quick moment from Faye where he says, "Well, at least someone will be cheering for us, and that's nice." Even if it's one person inside of a crowd of thousands, he still has that appreciation and understanding for the individual. And that's something that I desire to achieve on any level of notoriety whatsoever. Like, always be appreciative and grateful, even if it's only one person in the crowd that's cheering for you. Sometimes that's all you need to hold on to in order to have some ray of hope. And now that we wrap up the end of the 4th episode, we see the 2 teams entering the arena for the friendly bout. We have Faye, Leo Lachey, Pearl Diamond. It's teams of 2, so it's Faye and Lady Leo Lachey that are going to be competing against Dax and his teammate. And the game that's been presented is Sudoku? Is that what they said? Yes, the game is Sudoku, and it is an augmented reality board game that we're going to be getting the details of in the next episode. So I'm excited to see one of the top competitors from the region of Melra compete against the top competitors from Ruin. We have Dax, who's quickly become one of the main antagonists against the protagonist, and I like to see the passion that's shared between these. Even Faye recognizes that Dax seems really cool, but his overwhelming passion for the game overrides that, and he expresses it as a compliment, where Dax takes it that way and gives Faye the credit towards his passion and really wants this game to set his soul on fire. I assume we're going to have one of the most exciting episodes we've had thus far, and even not, I really like to And even if it's not the most exciting, I'm really stoked to see how these 2 different characters are going to be able to critically think and come up with solutions against each other. If we have 2 of the greatest apostles playing in different regions and different games coming together, I think we have something great in store for us. That'll wrap up episode 4. Let's get into the next one and see what we get. Episode 5, that's the end of episode 5. All right, we're gonna get better at this. It's my first time trying to make a video like this or do something like this, so bear with me here, but I think that we're going just fine. I'm enjoying myself, and I hope you're enjoying the series as well. Let's get into the next episode. We'll see how episode 6 goes. And thank you all for joining me. And at the very beginning of episode 6, welcome back everybody, we are sitting here with Faye, Leo Lachey, and Dax talking about the game that's been presented. They are in a Mind Arena, which creates a full augmented reality board game, and the game is Sugoroku, but instead of using dice to determine how many panels you'll be moving forward, it's card battle Sugoroku, where each character is given a special class that gives them access to a certain type of card style and a play style. So you have mages, travelers, wanderers, different things like that that will give you different abilities throughout the game. Seeing the two objectives of the game is to either get to the end first or knock your opponents out by taking away all of their life points. We have the different classes that are going to be getting selected here, and we're going to be starting our friendly god game inside of the city of Melra. So let's see what Dax and Faye can do to each other in this bout. Let's see how well their minds can wrap around the different solutions they may be able to come up with, and who is the more tactically superior of the two. It would be kind of cool to see Faye take his first loss in this, but at the same time, it would take away from the main character energy, where he's not destined to lose in this series, is he? I'm starting to feel that, you know? We're gonna 100% this all the way through. Let's see if my prediction's gonna be right. And again, this is a game with 4 players, so we're introduced to Kelric Shi, which is Dax's subordinate. He's another team member from the Apostles in the region. And then we have Faye picking Lady Leo Lachey that are going to be together inside of this. Oh. And I was wrong. Even Dax assumed that Faye was going to be picking the former god Leo Lachey to play by his side, but Leo Lachey looks at Pearl and says, "You got this, right?" So it's going to be Pearl, Diamond, and Faye playing inside of the gods game together. How exciting. We get to see a little bit more of how Pearl's going to navigate difficult situations, and we get to let Lady Leo Lachey sit back as a god and enjoy the bout. The 4 classes that have been presented are the healer and the traveler, or the trapper and the mage. So we have 2 classes that are focused on getting to the end of the board game, and 2 classes that are focused on taking your entire opponent's life. All of the cards that are presented for the abilities that each player will have are public knowledge, and all of the cards' abilities are accessible. So picking classes based around the hand that you've been dealt is going to be something that's beneficial. And it appears that Faye and Pearl have more of a support type style class where it's not going to be direct combat, while the exact opposite can be said for Dax and Kelric was her name, I believe. And just as Faye's predicted at the beginning of this episode, it appears that Dax's team is going to be going for blood, and they are going to be picking the mage and the trapper, while Faye himself has picked the traveler skill and Pearl Diamond has picked the healer. So we're going to have a sustainability and trying to finish the game composition versus a out for blood, trying to slow them down and take out all of their life point style play. And we'll see which one comes out superior as we get into this, not God's game, but as we get into this regional bout, the Mind game, the Mind Arena game. Ooh, and I was heavily mistaken. My apologies. It appears that Dax's team is going to be going double wizard against a traveler and a healer. So they are going with a very aggressive play style through this. And I should have kept watching a few more seconds before I made that last clip, I suppose. But hey, we're doing this all in live time as we get a lot of trimming done. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you're having a good time. And as we get into the roles of Sugoroku here, we have cards that are used as dice that allow you to choose how many squares you can move forward. Each square has different abilities. Silver squares let you draw 1 card, gold squares let you draw 2 cards, red squares give you 7 points of non-negatable damage. So we have different tactics that are going to be able to use when playing in this game, and it appears that if 2 players go for the same square, if 2 players end up on the same square, then they're not able to draw a card. So it's about picking the number of squares that you're going to move, and once everybody has drawn their movements, then players are allowed to move. So it's trying to make sure that you also don't end up on the same squares as your opponents to keep your hand as strong as possible. And immediately upon starting the game, Faye declares that they are going to start with the strong opening. He makes that declaration loud and very public. He also picks the same number that Dax has picked when it comes to the amount of squares they move, so neither one of them are going to be able to draw a card, but we are going to see what he means through this episode, when he says a strong opening, that confidence behind it really gives an indication to where his mindset is in this, and I want to see how Dax responds. And Dax immediately realizes that Faye, being the Traveler class, has the ability to move 7 squares, even though he chose to move 6 to prevent Dax from also being able to draw a card. Faye then asks the operator if they're allowed to be able to switch cards with partners on their team, and the operator notifies that no, you cannot switch cards, but there is an ability that essentially lets you switch hands or be able to use your teammates' cards. We don't know what that ability is or how it's going to come into play, but we know that from the first few episodes, every time Faye asks a question or when the operator or Meep is explaining the rules, there's always those little details that hold high value. So I want to hold on to that and really point it out here before we get through the rest of the episode and show just how level his head is when he's going into complex situations and how his ability to think farther ahead than anybody else really shines. And now that Dax has taken his first turn, neither one of them have been able to draw a card since they had landed on the 6th square, Faye and Dax together. Faye decided not to do anything but end his turn, while Dax, instead of ending his turn, has activated one of the secret cards. We know that when they were choosing their abilities in their classes, each player was dealt a hand of cards, and some of those cards were legendary status. They had secret abilities, or they were considered to be a special class card. And Faye realized that his card was only going to be used by a healer, so he has a card in his hand that we know can only be used by a healer, and he can't trade it to Pearl Diamond, but he did make sure that Pearl was going to have access to the card at one point. So I want to kind of keep track on how Faye manages to play that, knowing that he's not able to trade his card to his partner and hasn't been able to activate it himself since he's not the right class. Dax, on the other hand, got a special card for a mage class. This special card causes every player to receive damage that are on the board. So it's a self-inflicting card, but it also attacks both teammates from both teams. And I'm not sure what the method or technique is here that he's going to be going for by reducing his own life points. But we do know that Faye has something up his sleeve. He wanted to take the really strong start. He didn't do anything on his first turn, and we're going to see how. And can we just talk a minute on how cool games are going to become when AR gets to this level? The augmented reality inside of this game is close to where they have Yu-Gi-Oh! Happening now, and I'm really excited to be able to play in a big open arena where you have all these augmented monsters appearing in front of you. The state of video games is going to be so sick. And on the very next turn, we're starting to see a theme with Pearl Diamond. She had renamed the teleporting ability that she has into the Wandering because she didn't like how cliche the teleporting name was for abilities. And inside of this game that she's playing against Dax along with Faye, she gets a fireball spell that's called Mega Flame, and she thinks that's just too cringy. So she renames it Pearl Fire, which seems to have actually impressed Dax. He was mind blown at the fact that you can just have the audacity to recreate the name of a spell. And I guess in a grand Dax fashion, he renames his Blizzard spell to Dax Thunder, which makes no sense to anybody, me or any of the other contestants included. And now we get insight when Faye had asked the question to the operator, are we able to trade cards with our teammates? The operator said no, but there is an ability that essentially lets you swap hands. Pearl, on her next turn, had used a sacrificial card where you have to place one card into storage in order to activate the effect of another ability. Faye had also done the same thing. So now they've both effectively put one card into storage, and if they're able to access those cards, I bet we can guess which card Faye has deposited. So we know that we have 2 cards in storage, and one of them is going to be the legendary or the secret card for the healer class that Pearl's going to be able to access. So we're starting to see that small attention to detail and those questions really come to fruition here. We can see the difference in a small attention to detail on the difference in activating abilities. Pearl's next turn is activating a card that requires her to discard one card but not place one card into storage. So we've had cards that have been discarded and we've had cards that have been placed into storage now, and I think that that's going to be one of the details through this series or through this episode that's going to really show the grand scheme of Faye's plan to take victory over Dax. And as everybody is wrapping up the third turn, Dax has decided to step on one of the red squares that we had talked about causes self-inflicted damage, but under the natural circumstances, he had a spell to redirect any damage he would take to another player. With counter after counter, trap after trap being flurried out, we have Faye locked down, not able to use any of his cards, with Pearl using the legendary card that she had drawn in her hand. The only way that it works is if she's about to be knocked out of the game, she's able to save herself and stop herself from losing the match, but at the end of the turn, she will have taken 20 points of damage, creating an automatic loss. So now we're about to see what the secret card was that Faye had deposited, and if Pearl is able to pull off everything without getting herself countered. And now we're starting to see where the secret cards are coming to play and the grand scheme has opened up. Pearl has managed to get down to her final card, and after all of the traps and counters have been used inside of this bout, we know that Faye's secret ability was that you must have less than 3 life points remaining and only have 1 card in your hand. Pearl right now only has 2 life points, and she's going to take 20 points of damage if she lets her secret card activate on its own. So we're going to have the ability to take out that last final ace in the hole that Faye had been planning on since the very beginning of the game. And there it all comes out. As we get to the end of this episode, each team realizes that Faye had been bluffing since the beginning. When I had pointed out that he had asked the operator whether or not he can store his card in or switch it with the opponent, everything was designed so that Faye was able to get that secret card into his partner's hand and meet the win condition of having 5 or less health points and being able to secure the victory and 1 card left in your hand. So we've managed to get the card out of storage. We've managed to activate the ability. And with that last move, with the last legendary spell, Heartache, it redirects all of the damage that Pearl would take that turn to another player. So due to the fact that she used the Willing Sacrifice card, where if she was about to lose, she takes 20 points of damage at the end of the turn to resurrect herself, she's now redirecting all of that damage to Dax, which means that they have secured the victory inside of the game, not a God's game, inside of the local bout. So we have the final grand scheme all the way in fruition here. We know that Faye and Pearl Diamond have managed to take victory in this game with a great deception of saying we were not going to try to end the game by making it to the finish line. We were always going to be trying to take out all of your life points, but we had to pick classes that worked with our hands and were able to deceive you. So they recognize him as the monster that he is when it comes to the intellectual prowess he possesses. And we see one of the coolest endings for Pearl to be able to shine as a non-incompetent character through this series. 10 out of 10. Let's keep this going. At the beginning of the 7th episode, we're met with Lady Leolachea getting bombarded by fans. In Ruin, she's managed to terrify just about everyone, so she's completely awkward and out of her comfort zone, having a level of notoriety or fame, while simultaneously, Faye, being the guest of the World Games Tour, being in the city, has also had a plethora of people line up to get his autograph. Through this little cute interaction, we see Lady Leolachea realize that humans like to treasure different players' autographs, and she wants Faye's autograph too. So we could see them exchange little cute awkward smiles between each other when she asks, "Hey, can you please sign my ribbon so it'll feel personal and it'll always be a part of me? I can carry it wherever I go." And he awkwardly obliges in the most adorable way. And now that the wave of celebrity awkwardness has worn off and things have calmed down, Nell returns to tell Master Faye that she's willing to become his game analyst and wants to serve under him. But Faye recognizes that her talents are far too great for her to merely remain an analyst. And even though she has 3 losses, he seems to have a method that they may be able to possess to get her back into the Gods' games. He then proceeds to tell Nell that we know that you don't want to just be an analyst, you don't want to be my maid, you want a lot more than this, so meet us at the Arcane Court, and I assume that this is going to be the place where they're able to negotiate the amount of losses that a player has. So let's get into the episode and see exactly what Faye has in store for Nell joining his team. From here, we're getting into the next God game bout where we see Faye tell Nell that you have to stand back and watch us play this game. He does apologize, but teammates need to stand by their side, which leaves Nell utterly confused. As they enter the realm of elements, the Gods' realm, they meet Dax again along with Kelrich, and Dax, in his grand fashion with that same attitude that we can see developing in his character, manages to talk over one of the Apostles' captains as they try to introduce themselves, while also inserting that small level of arrogance while, saying they're only here to round off the numbers. We need to at least have 10 players on the team. So he's essentially calling them useless, but it is seeming to fit as a part of his character. He is the star of the show, the star of the realm, being fancy, famous, having his own live stream. We could see Dax has a really strong personality in this series. And now that the Meep has very first appeared, we can see that we are in the God game, we are in elements, and we are starting to get the rules. But this Meep is wearing a little kitty mask, which I just think is absolutely adorable. And outside of that, he says something, they say something, it says something. It says something very particular where it mentions that the Master, the God of the Realm, was anticipating 2 more players. There are 15 instead of 17. But it just brushes over that and says, well, anyway, no big deal, but I'm really curious to see if that's going to come back in any way, shape, or form towards some characters that we're missing in this series, or why they're not a part of the bout, or why a master was expecting them. So I want to make a small note of that for myself, and then keep watching to incur what may come from that. And now, the name of the game has finally been introduced. It's called Sunsteel Scramble, and the objective is to have one player that's holding the sunflower bring it all the way to a pyramid that's nearly a half-mile away. So each player is going to get a flower, and they don't know which the flower is. You have 1 sunflower, 1 poison flower, and 13 sandflowers. They look like they're in an Egyptian-themed Elements game, and it's a nice desert scene that's happening behind them. So the objective, the win condition, is to get the sunflower all the way to the top of the win condition is to get the sunflower all the way to the top of the pyramid that's a mile and a half away, and they're going to be having the God of the Elements along with some of his subordinates trying to capture the sunflower before the team that has it can make it all the way to the pyramid, while also simultaneously avoiding the poison flower that will cause anybody who captures it to be stunned. So the elements themselves will also have a flower, and all of the apostles are going to have a random flower. We have the poison flower, the sunflower, and then all of the sandflowers. Sandflowers are just pawns, sunflower is win condition, poison flower is how you can end up getting stunned or stunning the god. Now let's get ourselves introduced to the god of this elements and exactly the game that we are going to be playing and the methods that they are going to incorporate to win this game. And now all of the beasts that are going to be trying to steal their flowers also have their own flowers. So you can steal their flowers to get the beasts out of the game and make it a little bit easier on yourself, but they will also have poison flowers and sand flowers. So if you end up stealing one of the sand flowers, they're out of the game. If you steal a poison flower, you're going to be stunned for a prolonged duration of time. Oh, and the god of the elements also carries a sunflower, so if they manage to steal the god's sunflower, then they win the game, or if they manage to get their sunflower to the top of the pyramid, they also win. And right away, Lady Laodicea recognizes that they want to try to get the god to steal the poison flower. If you steal the poison flower, then it reveals the location of the sunflower and where it's being hidden, and it also creates a 5-second stun duration, which is more than enough time for a god to steal everybody's flower. So the gist of the game is that it's a game of deception and intuition, while also trying to meet the win conditions. The sunflower, poison flower, and all the sandflowers are allowed to be exchanged between the different members of each team, so Faye immediately begins devising a plan on how to deceive the god of the elements. They know that Lady Laodicea would be the safest bet, being a former god, to hold on to the sunflower, but that would also make it the most obvious choice. And with that, they can also easily deduce the fact that Lady Laodicea might just do the exact opposite of the obvious choice and hold on to the poison flower to let herself get captured or let it get stolen. So Faye is now trying to figure out a best way to deceive the god and who should hold on to which flower and how they should go about proceeding to get to the altar. And one of the key rules of this game is that if you never have a flower on you at one point in time, you're out of the game. So Faye is wondering if you're able to swap flowers, throw them to your partners, switch them out, and as long as one person is always holding a flower, you can throw your flower to them. But if you don't have one on you still, then you're going to lose the game. So I guess the question now is, can you have multiple flowers, which it sounds like you can. And here we get a little bit more insight to Dax and Faye's relationship, or his admiration and respect towards Faye, when he recommends that because it's Faye's god game, he should be the one to decide who gets the sunflower and the poison flower. The captain from one of the other teams immediately interjects with a,
What? Usually you'd be like, I'm the one who gets the sunflower and I call all the shots.
so he's extremely humbled when in the presence of Faye. He respects him heavily as a rival, and they have some cohesion between them when it comes to playing the gods games due to their similar passion levels. And as we are near the end of the 7th episode, we see the master introduce himself. Matmatu is an Egyptian-looking god who's playing in the elements today, and funny enough, there is not a Matmat1, which I think is just an absolutely hilarious thing to have to ask a god when it comes to his name. But it's a very understandable question, and why are you Matmat2 if there's not a Matmat1? And in a quick pan back to a different god, Ouroboros, the one they had defeated previously, we can see Ouroboros getting frustrated that they haven't used Ouroboros Eye in order to play another game with them. So Ouroboros is getting impatient and frustrated, looking to go find them to play the games with them themselves. And that'll wrap things up for the 7th episode. I'm excited to see how Ouroboros is going to intervene inside of the other gods' games, along with how Lady Leo Lachey and Faye are going to go about outwitting this god. They've managed to make Matma smile by giving him a completely different scenario than he's faced before. Due to the fact he's played this game so many times, he's used to it. Faye knows that trying to trick the god and deceive him is going to be by doing something the god would never expect or has not seen placed inside of the game before. The idea is instead of protecting the sunflower, no one will know who has the sunflower, so there's no subconscious bias to keep that person safe. And Faye knows that this is going to be a key part of the plan, so nobody else can give up the location of their own flower, let alone the sunflower. Episode 8, and right at the beginning of this episode, we see a declaration made that multiple characters are holding on to the sunflower. This is something that made Matma smile because he realizes it's going to be a game of intellect, and now there's no conscious bias behind protecting the person who's holding the actual sunflower. So the plan is to outsmart the god, outwit them, and trick the god into taking their poison flower. And Nell, being a game analyst, is standing on the sidelines of her team and recognizing this almost immediately, that they are trying to trick the god into taking the flower before they try to get their flower to the top of the pyramid. And immediately upon the game starting, Matmatu summons his army, which are golems, but the golems just happen to be kitty cats, same as the Meep wearing a cat mask, but these are nice big plushy cats that look like Squishmallows, and it is an absolutely adorable golem, if I do say so myself. And the team sizes are 15 apostles versus 1,667 golems that are going to be chasing them down. So it's a little bit of an unfair bout, but the numbers are construed the way they are. You must accept it and play with the odds in your favor or against them. And only a few moments into this game, we could see the powers of the cat golems. They managed to have self-regenerating abilities along with using magic. So if you can outrun the cats, they start blasting you from far away with sandblasts and different levels of wind magic. But they also run so fast that they're able to pick you up, catch you, and steal your flowers. So trying to battle the cat golems isn't going to be working, but stealing their flowers seems to be one of the only options to get them out of the game. Oh, and halfway through the bout, we get a flashback to when Nell had made the bet with Dax, saying if Faye wins tomorrow, then you have to do one thing that I tell you without question. But if you win tomorrow, I will join your team as an analyst. So now we have the details of the prior bet that was placed before they had played the local friendly competition in the last episode. And all Nell had asked of Dax for the condition of her bet was that if Faye did win, that Dax would do everything in his power to make sure that Faye won the gods game when they had played together in the following week. And now that Faye and Pearl have made it to the god's altar, they're each carrying one of their own flowers. Faye tells Pearl, you have to make it to the top of the altar in order to win the game. And as he gets caught by one of the golems, he proceeds to throw his flower to Pearl, which leads the god Matma to believe that Pearl is now holding the sunflower at all costs because she is the one who's at the altar, and he had risked everything to make sure that she was the one holding that flower. So we're going to see exactly what Faye is thinking in order to make sure that they trick the god into stealing the poison flower. Let's see how the god takes this. Oh shit! So Pearl, instead of using the Wandering to teleport herself to the top of the pyramid and secure the sunflower, she had teleported herself above the god in hopes and an attempt to steal his flower. By crushing the flower that was stored in the scepter, she's managed to steal it, but it happened to be the poison flower, stunning their whole team for 5 seconds. Oh, and the way that Faye manages to trick the god in this situation by leaving Pearl with 2 sandflowers. The way that Faye has managed to trick this god is by holding on to 2 flowers the entire time. So he manages to tell the god, you should have been paying attention. You would have noticed that we've had less players, but he had 2 flowers and thrown Pearl a fake sandflower. In this midst of the god believing he won the game, he decides to show a level of generosity and pan over to an oasis hiding inside of the middle of the desert that shows the location of his sunflower hiding under one of the palm trees. And now everything makes sense. We didn't get to see how Dax was removed from the game when he started talking to Nell about their previous bet, but he had used the manipulation of running far enough away for the sand golems to blast him with a sandstorm to hide the fact that he was then passing his flower over to Faye, and he had the sunflower the entire time. So we have Dax making a willing sacrifice to put his trust in Faye in order to win this game, which means that he did indeed complete his promise to Nell by doing everything in his power to make sure that Faye was able to win this over the god. And a part of the plan for Faye was to make sure that the stun on the god from the poison flower was in effect when he managed to run his sunflower all the way to the top of the pyramid. By doing this, he had given the poison flower to Lady Leolashea, and she willingly handed it over to one of the cat golems in order to stun the god at the perfect moment, so Faye is able to stunning the god at the perfect moment. And now that Faye has the sunflower, the god is stunned for 5 seconds. Kelrich comes in with her Arise being an enhanced body modification where she is able to throw Faye straight to the top of the tower, and we end this 8th episode with Faye taking yet another victory over the god Matmatu inside of Elements. That is another great episode, and I hope you all enjoyed it just as much as I did. I apologize. So that was the end of the game, but not the end of the episode. When they get out of the game, we learn that there is a god called the Bookmaker that can help erase the losses by wagering some of the wins. So Faye comes up with a plan to get Nell back in the game. Due to the fact she has 3 wins and 3 losses, he's going to have Secretary Baliger from the commission in Melra contact the head of the commission for the Gods Games in Ruin. Secretary Miranda is her name, the head of the commission for Ruins, where Faye is from. And in this moment, he has a small quip where he talks about, yeah, I can work with that. If you're 3-3, 3 wins, 3 losses, Nell, then I think I can do something. And it seems that he has something more on his mind than just getting her 1 loss erased from the Bookmaker. So I'm curious to see what his grand plan is when they get to that point. It's also revealed that the Bookmaker hasn't been challenged in over 2 decades, let alone it's been 4 decades since anybody has challenged the Bookmaker from the Divine Gate that's in Ruin. So Chief Miranda is quite surprised when Faye mentions that they are going to be challenging the Bookmaker in order to get Nell's loss erased. That way she can officially compete on the same team with them. What a great guy, am I right? And as we wrap up episode 8, officially here, we get a small insight on what's to come where Nell seems to be facing herself at a poker table in front of a god. So it's a little bit interesting to know if this is going to be something she's imagining in her head or if it's fruition for the next games that are to come. But I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did, and you have a wonderful week. See you.